Welcome back to another edition of the Quantum Yoga Podcast. Today we're honored with Dr. Julia Mossbridge, who is author of the upcoming book, The Premonition Code, and a scientist at IONS and also the director of the Innovation Lab there. Wow, I've been waiting for months to talk to you. I'm so glad we connected. Thanks for taking your time.
It's a delight to meet with you today, and I'm looking forward to talking about a wide range of whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, good. Well, let's start with the book, because this actually precognition and premonition and intuition, and there's a whole bunch of terms that seem to be kind of related to this essential meaning, and I wonder if you could define that for us. And then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, sure. So think of intuition as the umbrella term. So intuition covers everything from a premonition to precognitive experience, or what's called precognition, which I'll explain in a second. And it also covers sort of what people call hunch or gut feelings. So intuition is a broad category that essentially means you have a feeling about something, you don't quite have a story about the logic of why you're feeling that way, but nonetheless, you're feeling that way. And there are people in mainstream academia who are studying intuition. You know, the Office of Naval Research has just put out a grant a couple of years ago asking people to propose intuition studies for them, because they know that soldiers and naval officers who have good intuition actually survive more, right? And so it's a general sort of umbrella term, and it can include things like gathering information through the subconscious mind about, you know, you don't notice that you hear a rumble of thunder in the distance, but some part of you does and says, I think it might rain today. You don't know why you think that. So that's considered intuition. Everything from that to having a dream where someone dies, and the next morning you find out that this person who was totally healthy actually dies. So those are all types of intuition. But the latter type that I just talked about falls in the category of either premonition or precognition. And so let's talk about that subcategory now. So premonition comes from words that mean pre or before, and moner, to warn. So it came originally from a root that sounded like you were being warned of something negative. You don't have premonitions about something that's positive if it's a warning, right? And it has evolved into something that has basically become equivalent to what scientists call precognition, or scientists who are studying precognition call precognition. So the sort of more scientific name is precognition, and the more colloquial name is premonition. And so now people talk about, I had a premonition that I would win the lottery. So that's a positive thing for a lot of people. And so there's almost no distinction. But here the implication is that it's not that your subconscious mind was gathering clues that were sort of subliminal or under the sensory boundary. It's that you were getting information from another source that is not among the five senses, or is not among sort of logic and inference and memory as tools to gain information or predictions about the future. So for example, it would not be precognition to have a dream that you're gonna fall down the stairs the next day if you already know that it rained and then it got really cold and now it's icy, and you also have fallen down that stairs in the past. So these kind of things make you think, okay, that's actually gathering information from logic and inference and past sensory events. It might be more likely to be a precognitive experience if you have a dream that, or you have a feeling that there's a fire and you need to do something. You need to do something in relationship to this fire to save a child, for instance, and then that exact thing happens. So that would be in the category of premonition or precognition. And premonitions and precognitions, they can come in dreams, which they often do. They can come in waking life. They can come in lucid dreams. They can come in just feelings, and sometimes they come in feelings that you don't know you have. So you can actually measure them in the body. And correlate them statistically with future events without the person even knowing that that's going on.
Would presentiment also be synonymous with this? Is that something different?
Presentiment, thanks for reminding me of that. So my original work in this area started with working on presentiment. And presentiment is another name for what I just mentioned, which is when your body, when you can measure, a scientist can measure your physical changes that are correlated with future events chosen by a random number generator. So you're not sensing some kind of subliminal information. You actually, no one on the planet knows what the next event is, but your body's sensing it in some way that's correlated with the future event. That's called presentiment. Or it's,
Okay.
or I think I coined a term for it called physiological anticipatory activity, and some people use that now, but the most sensible name for it is presentiment, since that's understandable.
Well, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about your work that occurred leading up to this book and some of the studies that you have performed. I thought, because I had read through some of them before, they were fascinating and the results were really fascinating. Can you share some of those studies that you did?
Well, before I do that, I'm sort of curious. I want to put it in the context for you and your readers, and I mean, I'm sorry, you and your listeners. And I've had a lot of conversations with people about this before, so I would like to understand where you're coming from with your interest in this and what's interesting to you.
Well, I'm interested in particular with some of the physiological research that you've done and what you've measured with some of the biofeedback, so GSR stuff. And I don't know if you got into EEG as well and looking at what's going on in the brain when this kind of thing happens.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, sure. I can talk about all that. But why is that interesting to you? What is it about that is so interesting?
Well, that's part of the theme of the podcast, is to look at how consciousness and physiology kind of interface and different aspects of the way that they interface. So that's an overarching theme.
Got it. Thanks. That's super helpful. So I'm really interested in using, or for a while, I'm less interested now, but for a while I was really interested in using physiology and electrophysiology, so EEG, to figure out what's going on in the brain and in the body related to time, related to events in time. And I started doing that outside of this idea of precognition. I started looking at EEG with audiovisual signals and their synchrony. And before that, I was involved without EEG. I was just looking at behavior, psychophysics for auditory timing events. So I've been interested in time before I got interested in the biosensing part of it. But yeah, I guess as a postdoc, I wrote a grant. That's right. I wrote a grant for the Bial Foundation, which is in Portugal, in Porto, Portugal, and they fund something like 75% of the parapsychology research in the world. And I got my courage up and I said, I'm going to, apply for one of these grants. And what I was looking at, I applied for several of the grants and I got them. And so I did a series over several years as a postdoc. And let's see, one of them was about just trying to see if I could train people to get better at conscious precognition. So conscious precognition is different from presentiment in a way, because you're literally asking someone, instead of just recording from their body and letting them have experiences of future events that are predicted by a random number generator, you're actually asking them, I want you to figure out what that future event's going to be. And I was horrible at that. Did not work. People did not get better. And I trained them on heart math too. I thought if they get better at heart math, maybe they'll get better at this. That did not help. So I've been very focused and interested on training precognition for a long time, and my methods originally were just crap. But one thing I did, one of those, I think I had 2 or 3, I can't remember, grants, but one of them was about using a pattern classifier. So this is the earlier days of pattern classification, machine learning, to take the signals. And I guess I was working with GSR at the time, and was I doing respiration? No, I was doing heart rate time series. And to see if I could classify whether, for instance, someone was being, so this wasn't the precognition experiment, whether someone was being looked at or not through a closed circuit camera, the sense of being stared at type studies. And that I was able to do, statistically significantly, and I was impressed by that. The precognition stuff, unfortunately, my design, I mean, you learn a lot when you start studying this stuff, and my design was poor. And for both the sense of being stared at and the precognition stuff, there were problems with the design that I had to filter out when I did the analyses and to report. So I never published that stuff that's sitting as conference papers. They're not problems with the design that invalidate the results, because the results were very interesting, but I would not design it that way again, because I was actually making it harder on myself. So do you want me to go down the rabbit hole of all that stuff?
Well, more of an overview of some of your interesting findings.
Yeah, okay.
Rather than the methodology.
The story of how I failed so many times. Sometimes I think it's really important to talk about how you fail so many times, because that is how you learn. That's the
feedback, right?
Yeah, that's the feedback. That's how the universe shapes the dance and helps you understand what's really there. So important findings, I almost don't remember as much as failures. So let me just think back. What are important findings? Okay, so probably number one from that time period was that both in skin conductance, so GSR, and in heart rate, there was this inverse relationship between male and female. So men and women, I shouldn't say male and female, because they were just what they declared as their gender was men and women. There was this inverse relationship between when the physiological traces, when people were about to sort of win or be correct. In that experiment, let me explain the experiment so you can understand what I mean. So in that experiment, there's a computer screen, and you've got 4 potential images chosen from the IAPS data set, so this international affective data set, and they were all either neutral or positive in affect. And the person's job was to click on which image they think is the one that is going to be shown to them as the target. So which one is the random number generator going to choose? And as they're doing, and they get as much time as they want to do this, and I have them do it 25 times. And as they're doing this, they're hooked up to skin conductance electrodes and a heartbeat monitor, but it's just a plasmograph, so it's just a finger monitor. And the whole time, and so I can separate out the traces afterwards according to whether they got it correct or not, to see if they could anticipate if there was any difference in their physiology before correct versus incorrect trials, right? Because their performance is about a chance, because most people aren't good at this. This is a hard task, predicting the future. So right. Most people aren't good at it. And so the most important finding from that was that when men were, so the 10 seconds prior to when the random number generator chose which of the 4 images was correct, which was immediately after the person chose, men showed this very clear arousal pattern in heart rate and in skin conductance. So massive increase in skin conductance, increase in heart rate, great. Women are showing the opposite. So they're about to win or be correct, they're going down. In skin conductance, it was less clear in heart rate, if I remember correctly. And I thought that was interesting. And then I started to ask myself, so that was significant, but then I said, well, I don't know if I believe this, because this could be explained by other sort of, it doesn't matter, technical things. So then but to solve the technical thing problem, I just looked at the very first trial. And that was important and a new thing to do in the field, because you couldn't claim that it was all because of whatever happened on the previous trial, because there was no previous trial. So I just looked at all men and all women, and I could clearly see that it was even more significant. I mean, like, I could clearly see the difference. There was a gender interaction, and I was like, all right, there's something that's going on. There's this gender difference thing happening. So that got me interested in just asking the question. And then I had another group of women, and I saw that again. Then I thought, I'm going to train myself. I'm going to do this. I did the task 625 times and looked at my skin conductance, and I looked like the female or women, that pattern, which I thought was interesting, because I'm sort of gender ambi, because of being in sciences. It happens where you learn about being both genders. And, or for many people, I don't know if that's true for anyone else, certainly for me. So I was like, well, I guess I have this trait of like calming down before and getting excited before I fail, and calming down before I succeed, right? Yeah. So I'm fascinated by that. And then I started saying, well, what is going on for other people in this field? This was when I finally believed that there was this presentiment thing that I'd read about for years. I had talked with Dean Radin, I had looked at the research, I was impressed with it, but to see it in my own hands, that turned on a light for me. I mean, even though I'd had precognitive experiences since I was a kid, and I knew that time wasn't working the way that people were talking about, it doesn't matter. When you see the data in a controlled experiment in your own hands, and it's right out there for you to see, I had a mentor who once said, then you've swallowed the wolf. The wolf is now inside of you and it will eat.
Mm.
You know, and it will eat and it will ask you to do more experiments and it will basically control the rest of your life. And that's what happened. So I saw that and I said, oh, now, yeah, that's really what it feels like. And so I said, okay, now I'm going to ask a bunch of other scientists to show me their data and I'm going to look through the literature. And I ended up doing this big meta-analysis with Jessica at UC Irvine and a guy named Patrizio Trasoldi, who's a precognition presentiment researcher at University of Padova in Italy. And so we worked together to create this meta-analysis. I mostly drove it forward and I wrote it and then they helped, and it got a lot of press because we were very conservative in the statistics and it was difficult to find problems with it. And some people did find problems with it, and then we talked with them about it and had a nice collegial interaction. But it was all very collegial and conservative, really, from a scientific point of view, which is, I think, why it did well. So that was the beginning of my launching my, okay, I guess I'm going to study precognition now.
Well, let's fast forward into the book. So there seems to be a few components of the book, one being establishing somewhat scientific research, well-validated the existence of precognition and that it's available, right? And there's another component in training people, which is what you started to develop into what you were saying. So let's talk about the training now in the book, and what are some of your methods for doing that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I tried and failed to train people at what I call short-term precognition, which is this, in the next few seconds or minute, try to predict X, right? The conscious precognition. I also tried and failed to teach people unconscious precognition in the short term. And then I thought, well, I'm being kind of an idiot because while I'm focused on the short-term precognition, actually the most useful kind of precognition is long-term precognition. Right? Like obviously, if you have a longer lead time for something, you could potentially do things to steer towards or away from something. So I thought, well, and not only am I being an idiot in that way, I'm also being an idiot in the following way, which is there were a group of people who for decades have been training people to do long-term conscious precognition, and I was ignoring their work. Well, that was not cool. So I was just like, all right, now, you know, it's the process, right? So I started looking at the remote viewing world, and I realized what they're doing for the most part, not always, but what they're doing when they do it sort of in a well-controlled place is they're doing controlled precognition. I mean, so I don't know, do your listeners know about remote viewing?
Yeah, I think some of them, we haven't crossed that topic in the podcast, but we will be talking to Russell Targ in a couple weeks. Right. So this is a great, and I meant to ask you anyways about how this overlaps with and differs from remote viewing.
Yeah, so great. So let's just quickly define remote viewing and then talk about the overlap difference. Okay. So remote viewing, people will define it in different ways and they'll get strong differences of opinion about what the definition of remote viewing is. So I'm going to give you the most vague definition that covers, I think, most of the categories and let the people who like to argue about it. But so I would classify as remote viewing a situation where the person does not have access to any information about a potential target, except for something like a number or what they call a tag, which is just a way to identify the target. So if I said to you, 389674, that's your tag. As a remote viewer, your job would be to take that, write it on a piece of paper. That's all you get. And then to have the intention to sketch or write out everything that you think is coming to you that's appropriate for the question that is associated with the tag that you don't know. So the question could be, describe everything in this picture. The question could be, describe this convict who's sitting, at a particular jail cell. The question could be, describe the year 2027 in the country, Zimbabwe, in the most detail you can. So you have no idea what the question is. It could be anything in the world, right? And your job is to train yourself to get into a state of accessing that information. Now, so let's call that remote viewing for the purposes of this conversation. So now, what is controlled precognition? So what controlled precognition is, I'm saying the subset of remote viewing where the target that your tag is associated with, the question that your tag is associated with, is about a future event. that is controlled precognition. So it's not about, Stephen Schwartz has done amazing work with anthropology using remote viewing. They've found all sorts of treasure using remote viewing. That could be thought of as a future event in that they go find it in the future. But it could also be thought of as a past event because you could sort of mentally time travel to the past and get the information, right? So these kind of weird sort of, when you get in this community of thinking about this stuff, you start arguing, well, is it telepathy or, what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
So this controlled precognition is about the target is not known by anyone until the future, right? So that's really, really defined controlled precognition. Then there's a looser controlled precognition. Someone might not know the target, but they're not telling you. Mm-hmm. But the best, most rigorous is no one on the planet knows what the target is until the future. And it works pretty well with people who start out good at it. And for people who don't start out good at it, it seems that they improve. Now, if you talk to Joe McMoneagle, who is one of the world's best remote viewers, he doesn't think they improve, but he's sort of not counting the part where he trains them. He actually teaches controlled precognition to people. And he calls it remote viewing, but it's essentially what I'm calling controlled precognition. He trains people and they do get better, but he says, well, they just needed the training. Well, I call that getting better. Okay. So there's, and Russ Targ, I'm sure will talk with you about his ESP trainer app. So people can get better at this stuff, and there's a certain sort of distribution of skill in the population. It's just like with music, you can train someone to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on the piano, but they might become a concert pianist.
Right. And so just out of curiosity, what is that distribution of skill?
We don't know. And out of curiosity, I would like to find out. And that's part of why, I worked with Dean Radin and others at the Institute of Noetic Sciences on creating the PsyQ app, PSIQ, which is in the App Store for like 3 more days. And then we're going to change it to the name Psy3, PSI3. For various reasons. So anyway, you should be able to find it at one place or the other, one name or the other in the App Store. But and also why we created the Premonition Code website. So with this book coming up, which is called Premonition Code, the website is called the Premonition Code. And Teresa, my co-author, and I, Teresa Chung, decided that we wanted to create a website that would allow people to practice controlled precognition and also screen for people who are really good at it. So we have like a hall of fame for people who are really good at it and stuff. And that website arises in the world on October 1st.
October 1st, right?
Yeah. So I'm very curious about that, and no one knows the answer. Dean Radin at IONS is also super curious about it. We're all very interested in finding out, what are the personality traits? What are the gender age differences that correlate with this kind of stuff? What are how much is the spread in the population? All these things are unanswered, and we only now have the technology to start answering these questions.
Can you perhaps talk about defining characteristics of people who are very good at this?
Yeah, I can, but I just want to sort of caveat that beforehand, which is if what I'm about to say strikes people as, oh wait, I'm not that way, so maybe I'm not going to be good at this, then don't listen to what I have to say, because everything that I'm about to say is based on several studies, but not many, and with probably not enough people to make strong conclusions, and they're weak correlations. So now I'm going to say some things. So one is, it looks like creativity, having a lot of creative output and a creative impulse may be very linked to your ability to do controlled precognition. One of the first people who did controlled precognition at the time, even before it was called remote viewing, was an artist who was totally like over the top, artistic, flamboyant, amazing, and just kick ass at figuring out targets and providing useful information. But that's just anecdotal, but actually studies, across populations show this. So this is interesting. They do show it more for things like telepathy than precognition. Fewer studies have been done on precognition for this, but it's kind of a similar bag. Let's see. There's meditation. So people who meditate In fact, there was a great study with Tibetan monks that was replicated. So now 2 studies showing that the longer the duration of meditation in your life, the more you're good at controlled precognition or conscious precognition, which is what they did in that experiment, which was actually the short term in that experiment. People just got better. And you could correlate, the nice correlation with hours of meditation. Now, it's not clear whether that's age, because especially with monks, the more they meditate, the older they are.
Right.
So that needs to be looked at, but there's something there. So we don't see that in the population. I don't see a general. I've done studies with a couple thousand people and with at least short-term precognition, and you do not see like an increase in performance with age. So let's see. There's meditation. There's the personality trait of openness and extroversion. I actually trust the openness result more than the extroversion result, but they've both been shown in multiple studies with not just spontaneous precognitive experiences, because kind of who cares? If you have a spontaneous precognitive experience, we don't really know if that was precognition because we're not in the lab, but actually correlations between the personality traits of openness and extroversion and performance in the lab on precognitive tasks. So the more extroverted, the more open, the more likely to perform well on those tasks. And that's been replicated a couple times. And I'm an introvert, even though I can play an extrovert on TV, and I'm pretty decent at precognition. And there's plenty of other people. These are not like high correlations. These are general trends that are replicated.
Okay. So part of this book is sort of sourcing just how well are people at large doing at this practice of precognition, and there is a sort of global precognitive experiment that you're running along with this.
Yeah.
If you can talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the experiment is about, we believe it's the first of its kind. So let me take you through a standard controlled precognition trial, the way it's done now, and so you can understand the problem with it. And we're fixing that problem with this experiment, and I'm really excited about that because I'm all about fixing the problem. So a standard controlled precognition trial now that might be done online is you have a person get to their place of centering, or where it is that they get this information, however they do that. So there's a million ways to do that, right? Probably one for each person. So more than a million. And you have them associate the tag, with whatever it is they're coming through, and they're writing this down on pages of blank paper. And then when they're done and they're like, great, I'm done. Different studies will do it different ways, but generally you like stick it in your printer, you scan it, and then you have to upload it before you move ahead. And then there's 2 ways to do it after that. Either someone can judge the relationship between what you just submitted and what the target is, right? And whatever that is. Or another way to do it sort of on a more massive scale online is the person self-judges. So for instance, you show them 2 pictures or 4 pictures or 4 videos or whatever it is, and you say, which one of these was your target based on what you did? And the person chooses, I was doing a lot about trees, and then there was outdoors, and it really seemed like the breeze was coming, and so I'm going to choose the one that looks like a park, because that seems most like mine. And then they're told, okay, you were great, you got it right, or here's your picture, and they show the park, or, oh no, you're wrong, it was the bicycle that was by the side of the road, and you got that one wrong, and here's your picture. So that's how normally it's done. And there's a place called the Applied Precognition Project by a wonderful guy was created by a wonderful guy, Marty Rosenblatt, who does it that way, and he gets good results. I mean, he uses his results to actually trade in the stock market, and he makes good money, right? So he gets good results doing that. But people complain about, the people who are doing the controlled precognition complain, and I complain too to him, that if you're precognitive and you're going to show me 4 pictures from which I have to choose, I'm going to get elements of each of those pictures into my precognition. Happens every time. For me, it happens every time. I get all of them instead of, I'm not as skilled as Joe McMoneagle, who would get all of them and also know which one was the target too, because he could look at both places in time. I'm not that skilled, right? So I just get bits of each of them, and I'm like, great, I can't choose, right? So what we're trying to do with this experiment is to move the field forward by giving people the option of not having to see the pictures, but also self-judge, so it can be on a massive scale. And so the way we're doing that is each time you do a trial, it takes you through the steps. There's 6 steps of getting the information, yada, yada. Takes you through the steps, gets you into the place, reminds you of what it says in the book so that you can get into the place of where you're getting the best information that you can at that time. And then it shows you, instead of 2 pictures, it shows you 2 graphs. And the graphs represent the contents of 2 pictures, but you're not seeing the pictures. So it's way more analytical. It doesn't enter the symbolic part that an actual image would. And so, on one side of the graph, you'll see, oh, there's a line over here that's indicating that there's a lot of people in this image, and that the image is mostly people, and then there's a little bit of water. Okay, and then this other graph is showing me that it's mostly human-made structures, and there's almost no natural elements. So these are very different. So always the 2 graphs we choose are very different. And then the person's job is to look at what they did and say, now, is it most like the people in the water, or is it most like the human-made structural elements? Oh, it's most like human-made structural elements, so I'm going to choose that one. And then they get shown the picture. And they only get shown one picture, and it's always the correct picture. So that is just a simple change that we did to try to get it so that more people can do better at this task without the confusion of having to be an expert precogger to sort out things in time.
But there is, and you do have a way to sort of judge skill level, right? In this, and so give us an idea of what might be the most advanced precog ask.
Well, the most advanced precog, so there's a couple things. One is just statistics. So essentially, if you do this 100 times, if you're at a rate above chance of X, then we already know you're good, right? And so we only put people in the Hall of Fame who are statistically reliable, positive precogs. We call them positive precogs, by the way, because we're supporting this idea that you can use your precognition for positive things in the world. There are also negative ways to use precognition. So we're basically stressing the positive here. Or not stressing, let's say emphasizing. But in terms of the sort of the more granular, like looking in more detail at what people are doing besides the simple statistics, the hardest targets are targets with letters and numbers. So it's from my own experience too, if there's a target with letters and numbers, I usually either don't pick up on the letters or numbers, or I think there's letters or numbers, but I don't know what they are. But people can train themselves to go, okay, there's letters and numbers. Okay, that can be hard. All right. So let's let them come to me. And some people can get better at that. So the people who are really good will not only get that there's letters and numbers, but they won't be scared off by that, and they'll learn probably over time, or maybe they'll be de novo right out of the gate. I don't know. Be able to let those come to them and actually report like a license plate. So some of the images are like license plates or combinations or things like that. So those people with that kind of skill, if they're consistent, like, we're going to call them.
Yeah.
Get them into the lab.
And you guys make a point to talk about dreams, and dreams being sort of a training ground almost for developing this skill of precognition. Can you talk a little bit about that and its importance?
Yeah, I mean, so, most people in the world, in the Western world, actually, let me just sort of change what I was going to say for a second. Most people in the Western world, the only sort of consistent relationship they have with anything outside of everyday waking consciousness is the dream state. And that's accepted. Like, it's not taboo to say that you had a dream last night. So a lot of stuff can come out through dreams that can't come out in other ways. It's unacceptable to come out in other ways, but it can come out in a dream because everyone agrees that you don't have control over your dreams, and it's this other state and stuff. And so we have that much of a cultural taboo on different states of consciousness that the dream state, I think, is where a lot of stuff comes through, because that's the only opening.
Yeah, wow, okay.
So that's why we emphasize dreams. It's like, great, you've got a crack, and you've got to crack into this sort of accessing this information. Now, how can you start really drawing from it and setting your intention to get information from that state? And then you can open it up a little and ask, how can I get myself into the state of getting information about future events when I'm awake and I have a pen in my hand and a piece of paper? So that's another step. How can I get myself into that state without too much time? So I don't have to take half an hour meditating. How can I get myself into that state in 5 minutes or 1 minute or 0 minutes? So that's another step. And now once I reliably can get into that state, and I can use it for good, we talk about ethics in the book. I'm working my ethics. I'm conscious of why I'm doing what I'm doing, whether it's just for my own practice, whether it's to help someone, whether it's a missing person or whatever it is you're doing, that you're conscious of why you're doing what you're doing. How can I do it better so I can give better information to whomever I'm working with, right? So it's this sort of staged process that one of the reasons we wrote the book is there's so much fear about this stuff, and so much of it has been linked traditionally with witchcraft and these things that have been denigrated and called, Satan's work, etc. And we want to say, here's another way to look at it. You can do positive work in the world by helping people move toward positive events that will support their life and away from negative events. And you can do that for your own life. And let's talk about how to do that. Instead of letting the sort of blank space of taboo and fear and confusion fill up with the stories that people hear about how that's the devil's work, yada, yada, yada. It's already been used. Controlled precognition has been used for decades to help, corporations, law enforcement, intelligence organizations have been using it for decades to help. So I'm not saying they haven't been using it to hurt, right? What I'm saying is that it can be used to help. So we ought to frame a culture and a community around helpful use of this instead of letting it wander into the wasteland of taboo.
Yeah. We do have a fair amount of meditators listening, and I wonder if you could speak to how, if you have that practice,
yeah,
you could potentially incorporate precognitive skill work.
I mean, yeah, sure. So a lot of meditators just have precognition happen to them more and more the more they meditate. You start to notice it spontaneously. Precognitive dreams are just precognitive feelings because you're paying attention, I think, essentially, more, you might notice the thought that comes up and says, I'm not going to take that highway home today. I'm going to take this other highway, and I don't know why, and I'm just going to do it because that's what's in the flow, right? You just might notice that. And then you find out later about a bad accident that the timing suggests that you might have been in that accident. You think, oh, great. I don't need to find out whether I was right by taking that other route, So that willingness to sort of let go of the ego that kind of wants to verify things when you're dealing with spontaneous precognition is actually really helpful, and to just accept the intuition coming up. That builds this relationship between the conscious and the non-conscious. So, part of meditation, all these non-conscious things come up that were previously not conscious. And so some of the things that come up is information that you can now use. So you're developing this relationship where you're starting to trust this information. So that's really valuable. And incorporating it it's almost no effort to incorporate it, right? So it's just like if you start a positive precognition practice where you're doing controlled precognition, let's say daily or weekly, it becomes part of a meditation. So now I just meditate, get myself into my state, do my controlled precognition. And each day that I do that goes better, just like with meditation, each day that I do that goes better than a day that I don't. Because it's a practice at building this connection. And it's a practice at listening and receiving and discerning and all the great stuff that's in meditation. There's not a lot of difference.
Yeah, well, it's so fascinating too, because I remember a moment talking to Dean Radin about, I don't know if we were talking about precognition per se. We were talking more about the photon through the slit experiment thing. And he was making a point of saying that mindfulness in particular, that particular style of meditation lends itself well, rather than something like a very quiet mind, deep, immersive, into the sort of, into the all, or however you want to term it. So instead of practicing mindfulness where you're tagging, you're noting, and then disregarding, there's sort of like a noting and a tag that you would add on to a piece of data, where you're now going, okay, that's a sorted into my precog folder, bin. Right? That's my bin. So then I wonder, how does one then to distinguish between, let's call it like subconscious and superconscious
Mm-hmm.
data that may be coming from one place or the other that
Mm-hmm.
is sort of like, well, I'm just processing in the background, it's, you know, sorting information, and
Yeah.
my body's just doing its thing, right? And
Yeah.
other is
All
like,
sorts of stuff that comes up.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so how do you see that?
It's practice. So what happened, that's why you need some sort of, that's why we're building this online tool, right? So that's why you need something to give you feedback. So once you get your feedback of the picture of the park, you can go through everything you wrote down, and you remember, oh yeah, I had this whole sensation of like this moving mechanism. There's nothing about the moving mechanism in this park. So whatever feeling it was that made me want to put down the moving mechanism, in the future, I'm going to tag that with, maybe this isn't quite precognitive, right? But then, oh, here, I drew a picture of a daisy, and there's a little kid playing over here, and I had this feeling of playfulness. And look, in the picture of the park, there's kids playing, like, oh, well, that really came through. There's a certain kind of clarity that, and unattachment, or whatever it is for you that is your tag for this stuff. And that reminds me of last time when this other thing came through with clarity and non-attachment. And so it's just learning with the feedback. The wonderful thing about it is it's almost like meditation with feedback, right? Because the outside universe, you're not alone, right? The outside universe says, no, the answer is this. And then you get to go back and go, if that was the answer, look at all the steps and look at all the things that fit and how I felt with those, and look at the things that didn't. And I swear you'll find consistencies where, like, for instance, for me, when I find myself thinking, well, this can't be right, this is ridiculous, I almost always have just a very excellent hit. Because my ego is just, it's like my superconscious is saying, I don't know if it's my superconscious or not. Some part of me, who cares? Some part of me is saying, here's some important information. And another part of me has decided that even though whatever the target is can be anything in the world, for some reason that one thing is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Which is in itself ridiculous.
Right.
Right? So it's like, as soon as I hear that, I'm like, I am golden. You know? I feel
Can one use emotions in some way to track this? So on one level, you're sort of observing, well, this kind of has an emotional hit for you, I would imagine, because when something is that ridiculous, you almost, it's almost an aversion experience, right? You're almost like, initially, until you learn to love it, right? Until you learn that that's a good sign. But what can you talk about emotions in relationship to tracking this?
It's all in there. What I can say is it's a self-discovery process that I think is unique for each person, which is why you need the feedback. So like if I try to tell you, so I can tell you what it is for me, but some other person is going to be like, it's the exact opposite for me. And they're right, you know? So it's like emotions are in there, sort of sensory stuff is in there. Like, oh, I hear the sound of a whistling bird right before something's really important. Smells can be in there. I have the word yellow often comes up, and I have to write it down before the next thing, and the next thing after yellow is important. It's like a little flag, like a highlighter, literal highlighter. Actually, I just thought of the highlighter now. I finally get the joke. That's the other thing is, it's funny, for me anyway. I know I'm on the right track when there's these little things that I don't understand, and when I see the target, it's like a joke. Like there's a pun that comes through and I'm thinking of something else, but like it's exactly what the thing is except the opposite meaning of the word. And it's just like, it's just a joyful connection with the part of me that I don't normally on a daily basis sort of call myself. And it's just wanting to be seen and known, and it's a delightful way to do that. But I just got the friggin' joke about the yellow highlighter.
Well, good. I'm glad that my feedback was helpful in your process. You spoke in an interview, and I really love this, and I hope we can talk about this now. This concept of the long body as a metaphor of understanding the mechanics of talking to aspects of yourself throughout time.
Oh my God, I love that. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And now I'm all sad because we only have a few minutes left. Should you want me to talk about that?
Can we fit it in?
And we're doing it right now, yeah.
Okay, good.
So the idea of the long body is this, it's built on a spatial metaphor. I think it was the Iroquois, but I forget, Native American tribe in the United States, in the Midwest. And if I remember correctly, and I don't want to mess this up, and I'm afraid I'll mess this up. So I'll just say what I think is true, and it could be wrong. My memory of reading that stuff is that there's that if I were in that tribe, my long body would include myself. It would include this water bottle. It would include this computer. It would include all the tools that I use on a daily basis. And it would include where I lived. And it would include some of the people of my tribe with whom I'm very connected. So it's a spatial long body. So really, there's my small body, my short body, which is just this. And then the long body is this more encompassing thing, right? Whatever's entangled with me kind of thing. So a temporal long body is what I'm fascinated by. So taking that metaphor and putting it in time and looking at ourselves over time like we do, like physicists look at particles, and they talk about a world line of a particle. So a particle is born, let's pretend a particle is born here. And in space-time, it goes to all the different places, and it lasts for millions of years. You know, it's all over the place in space-time, and then let's pretend it ends here. This is the long body. This is called the world line of that particle. And part of the work of doing controlled precognition and really thinking about precognition and time travel and these kind of things and how time works for years and years has made me have a different perspective on my life. And I think it's a valuable perspective. I'm writing a new book about it because I think it's really valuable to use. And that is to look at your life as a world line. So it's not just me. When I say, oh, I want this or I want that, that's really focused on right now, this me and just this small me. But what about looking at the whole world line of you? And what kindness can you give? What compassion can you give to the forward and backward directions in your world line of you? And one of those pieces of kindness is to bring it with you. Like, this is all of me. I had this amazing dream. I think it was in my 20s. Yes, it was. It was after I was 21 years old, sometime between 21 and 30. And I'm doing this with my hands because there was a point, it's a visual point. And it's that I was in this room in the house I grew up in, and there were all these versions of me going all the way back to babyhood and forward in time to very old. And these women, and they were all me, it was very clear. And we all had these glowing hearts, like, you know, these glowing hearts. And just without words, we all knew that what was going to happen is we were lining up like beads on a string, and we were all collapsing into one. And that's what made me start thinking about, oh, I get it. Like, they're all in me right now. They're all in this now. And they will all be in that now. And they were all in that now. And it opens up so many possibilities, and it's very relaxing.
Wow. Yeah, we could keep going with that. And I love, you mentioned one other practice that I think is useful for the listeners to take away. I think you called it love banking, because it sort of dovetails into this, where you can then project into other timelines from your current one. So it's a feed forward, feedback type system that is serving every one of you, every when.
100%. Yes, and I had the delight of talking, love banking is, I think, the name of my book, we'll see. But it's this idea that, look, if you have extra love sometime in your life, if you're feeling this extra goodness, spill some over into these other times. And if you're feeling a lack of love and connection and joy, receive it from the other times that have the extra, because they're all you, right? And it opens us up to such potential and possibility just in the moment, because you don't have to just be in the circumstances that are surrounding you right here, because you have all these other yous inside of you. So that's awesome. But I had the amazing experience of talking with Bruce Damer, who I found out also had a similar relationship with his past and future selves. And when he was a kid, so who is he? He works with NASA and does origin of life research and artificial intelligence and mission planning stuff. And he has a way to put himself into what most people would call a psychedelic state, but it's he does it without drugs, and he receives information about things that he then builds technically. He's very technically adept and also philosophically adept. But he, as a child, I think he was 10 or 11, and he saw his future selves line up, and he said, okay, we're going to make an agreement right now that you only send back to the littler selves love and positive feelings because they're doing the best they can. And they made that agreement. He made that agreement with his future self, and it has served him well because every time he can, he sends back positive love to his past selves. And one of the things I work with people on when they're going through hard times, and just as friends or something, and not a therapist or something, but just because I suggest this, because I like to suggest this, is to first the first step is to, from now, go all the way back, mentally go all the way back to when you were a baby and send all those selves love. So that's the first step, is to give out all that love to yourself. And then the second step is to now look forward and receive the love that's going to come from the future. And the reason you need to do it in that order is because it's hard to receive the love from the future until you've had the experience of all the overwhelming love that you can feel for your earlier selves. And then you start to trust yourself. You go, wait a minute, I can do this. I just sent a bunch of love back to the past. Now I can receive that because I know in the future I'll be able to do that, right? And it's a wonderful practice.
Wow, thank you for that. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
The book, The Premonition Code, October 1st is the release.
October 15th, actually, but
15th.
The website is on the 1st. We had to do it that way for various reasons.
Okay, so the website is live on the 1st. I believe you can go there now and actually input your email and get some updates.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you can
that way.
be on our launch list. Sure.
And excellent. Good luck. Good luck with everything, Julia.
Thank you, Jonathan. You asked great questions, and it was a delightful conversation.